When you hear the words Range Rover, what comes to mind? Well, for me, I think of the biggest Range Rover, the biggest, baddest one that kind of got the brand on the map here in the United States alongside the much more rough and tumble Defender. And since the first Range Rovers came to the United States, Land Rover has really taken the Range Rover nameplate and made it more of a sub-brand, and there are other models within the Range Rover lineup, and I am here with one of them. This is Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the all-new 2023 Range Rover Sport. Let's talk all about what this is, where it fits in the Range Rover sub-brand lineup, what it's powered by, there's several powertrains to pick from, what's going on underneath, and then of course we'll get behind the wheel and talk all about how it drives. It's going to be on back roads this time because this is the sportiest version of the Sport, if that makes any sense. If it doesn't, keep watching and you will see why. All right, so first of all, what is the 2023 Range Rover Sport? Well, in Land Rover chassis code designation, this is the L461, which is related to the L460, which is the new full-size Range Rover that also came out last year. These are both on a new architecture called the MLA Flex platform, which basically means nothing to a lot of people other than the fact that the Range Rover Sport and the full-size Range Rover are related. And that is a nice thing because this is more or less a full-size Range Rover that they put on the copier and shrunk down a little bit. And they tried to give it a little bit more of a sporting intention versus the full-size, which is just a touch more luxury oriented. Now these are of course all very off-road capable. They've got all the hardware, which I love. This is not just some crossover. There is a full-time all-wheel drive system that comes standard with low range. You have a center and a rear locking differential on this model. And this one is more street focused than anything because you'll notice these tires are gigantic with some gigantic wheels that they are wrapped around. This is a Range Rover Sport First Edition, and it's kind of an interesting way to get some things packaged together for the first model year, which is 2023. And really, unless you find one of these on a dealer lot somewhere, you're not going to get one. I regret to inform you, I'm talking about a vehicle that you can't buy, but there are other powertrains. A lot of the options that are a part of this one will be a part of the others that you can order, that you can specify. And there's going to be a Range Rover Sport SV, which kind of replaces the old Sport SVR, if you remember that one. And that is also going to take a lot of the cues from this first edition. This is just kind of an interesting first model year options and colors and everything combination. Let's talk a little bit more about this first edition and what of it is kind of interesting and going to parlay into other Range Rover Sports. So I mentioned the wheels and tires. These are gigantic. These are a 23-inch wheel. They are large. This is not the only wheel you can get on this vehicle. There are going to be several other options, of course, but in this case, these are quite large. So they have these wheels, and they are using them with some Pirelli P0 tires. Talk more about that in the driving portion, but they're a fairly wide tire. It's a 285 section width tire, and it needs that in this case because there's a V8 engine under the hood of this one in particular. Now, this is not the only powertrain you can have on the Range Rover Sport. It's just the one that comes on the first edition. So in this case, this is an all-new V8 to Land Rover. It is not a new V8 in general. This is a BMW sourced V8. It's called the N63 in BMW speak, if you know BMWs. And Land Rover went with this. They got rid of their old 5-liter Jag AJ V8, which was in my Land Rover that I loved back in 2010. It had roots all the way back there. But the 5.0 is gone, and I think they're getting rid of it because of tightening European emission standards in particular. And really, if you think about the logistics behind it all, Land Rover's going mostly electric, or electrified, if you will. It means mild hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and full electric. And these V8s are not going to be electrified at all, so why bother developing another one when it's only going to be for probably a few years? So they went to BMW and they said, hey, can we buy some of yours? And BMW said, sure. So in this case, this is the BMW N63. It is a twin-turbo 4.4-liter V8 making 523 horsepower and 553 pound-feet of torque. You should probably find that sufficient for just about anything you are doing. Now, when they come out with that Range Rover Sport SV for 2024, it's going to be the same engine, the same turbos, the same everything, but in a higher state of tune, and it's going to be over 600 horsepower, so more on that when it comes out. Now, I said this is not the only engine or powertrain that you can get in the Range Rover Sport, and that is the case. You can get the twin-turbo 3-liter inline-6, the Ingenium inline-6, which I've driven in every other Range Rover and Land Rover product I've touched actually. It's lovely. I really enjoy it. That's a mild hybrid setup with a 48-volt mild hybrid system on it. They will also offer that same engine in a couple states of tune as a plug-in hybrid. That is to say, it can run some of the time on full battery power, up to some sort of range. I'm not quite sure what the range is, probably 40 to 50 miles, and then it becomes a regular hybrid car. So they're going to be using that 3-liter inline six. It's a lovely motor, but if you want something bigger and badder, this is the one to get with that BMW N63 under the hood. Now, this is not quite just a BMW off-the-shelf N63. This V8 is going to be installed for now in this Range Rover Sport and the full-size L460 Range Rover. If you get it, it's called the P530. That's the trim level or engine designation that you get. And they didn't just take this off the shelf, so they wanted to make sure the engine could hold up to off-road use if people really did that. So they redesigned the oil sump and they moved the air intake so it sits higher up. So you still get good water fording capability, you still get good angles for approach and breakover and departure, which is more of a function of the vehicle itself. However, the engine also has to be able to support the angles at which all of this means you can put the vehicle. So if you have it at a really awkward angle or whatever, point being, you're not going to run this thing out of oil and starve it and spin a bearing. They did think about that. Okay, so we've talked about the engine, we've talked about the wheels and tires. We have to talk about the suspension. That is another big thing that they've updated, and while it's kind of unique to this first edition right now, it's going to be available as part of a package for other Range Rover Sports here in the near future. So this has what they call Dynamic Response Pro on top of the regular air suspension. So you've got a regular air suspension that will raise the vehicle and lower the vehicle as you're kind of expected to have on a Land Rover product at this point, or most of them. And then you've also got adaptive dampers that can get stiffer or softer based on the drive modes. So Land Rover also updated the air suspension so it can actually act as kind of an adjustable spring rate sort of deal for the sake of helping your handling. So it's got a multi-chamber air spring on each corner, and they can add or release air, and that kind of helps adjust the spring rate on top of the adjustable dampers, and in theory they say it makes it handle that much better. Now, the other thing they have on this one is called Dynamic Response Pro, and that's basically active sway bars. So it's a 48-volt sway bar system. We've seen this on other vehicles from other brands in the past, but it's nice to have it here. So basically it's just something that actively combats vehicle roll, and again works with those adaptive dampers and with the new air suspension to help everything stay where you want it. Now, that of course is all paired to Terrain Response 2, which is Land Rover's fantastic, very smart, computer controlled all-wheel drive system. So I mentioned you've got low range, you've got locking diffs. This vehicle in particular does have a locking rear differential. That is an option. And all of that in theory works really well together. You've got a dynamic mode for all your back roads, you've got a comfort mode for your highway cruising, and then you've got several different off-road modes that will, work based on rocks or sand or wading through water or whatever you're doing. And there's also an automatic mode where the computers will, in theory, just sort it all out. So you don't even have to worry, you can just push the little dial in and it will just take care of everything for you. Now, the other fun thing about all this that you have to consider with the Range Rover Sport is that they've added rear wheel steering. That is something that is coming to a lot of different makes and models lately. It's on the full-size Range Rover, and I'm so glad it's here as well. You have up to 7.3 degrees of rear steer, and it makes this car feel so much smaller, especially in a city environment or in a parking lot, or if you're trying to whip a U-turn. Now, I've been driving this as I drive everything in the middle of Washington, D.C., and if you're trying to get a parking spot on that side of the street, you can truly just crank the steering wheel and hit it, and it will pivot right around. It is such a nice little feature, and of course it works off-road too. All right, so with all that, respectfully, it is 91 degrees outside. I would like to get back in the air conditioning with the ventilated 22-way power seat and turn on the massager, and let's get on a back road and talk all about how this 2023 Range Rover Sport First Edition is to drive. All right, so let's talk about driving the 2023 Range Rover Sport First Edition. So right off the bat, I want to talk about tires, because so much of a new vehicle review, when you watch all of these from all of us, is about the tires, whether we talk about it or not. This car is on, like I said, those Pirelli P0 All Seasons. They're a 23-inch tire. It's a teeny little rubber band sidewall, and they're not my favorite tire. I've had a similar tire on a Volvo XC60, I believe, and also didn't love them there. They just don't have the best grip, and in the wet, I find them to be pretty average at best. They're better in the dry, but they're not my favorite tire, and I think think this car deserves a better tire because it's got plenty of capability and it just needs a little more grip when you start flinging it around. Not like most people are going to do that, but you know, they sell this as the fun one, so I just would love to see a different tire on here. But enough about that. Engine-wise, this is a peach. It sounds fantastic. Go ahead and just love the sound that comes from it. Typical V8. There is some turbo lag off the line if you're really getting started. There is launch control if you're going to use it, but most people won't. So just driving around, whether you're in the dynamic mode or the comfort mode, there is a little bit of turbo lag, but the flip side of that is that it makes really good power all the way up toward the top of the red line. So, you know, it's kind of a trade-off. Now, that pairs to a ZF 8-speed automatic, regardless of whatever engine you get, and I like the transmission quite a bit, as I do with pretty much every ZF 8. It's programmed well here, it's smart. If you put it in the sport automatic mode, it shifts just fine. Drive is the same thing, but a little slushy. And then, of course, you've got paddles here, and it will listen to you. And I think it'll let you just bang off the rev limiter, unless you've got your foot deep in the kickdown. So that is pretty nice there too. And then as far as steering, you know, the tires really do a lot for the steering on any car, but otherwise there is nice weighting. It gets a little heavier in sport mode, and it does give you decent feedback for this kind of vehicle. Obviously, I'm having a lovely time just flinging this around, and you know where the front wheels are, even if the grip from those tires is not, you know, optimal in some cases. It's easy enough if you lose traction. I did have a couple moments where I kind of got it all out of sorts like a baby deer learning to walk, and it was actually easy enough to figure out what was going on, just kind of naturally catch it, no problem at all. So really, you know, kudos to Land Rover, because this is a big, heavy SUV. This is not a sports car. And the fact that I could do that, okay, right there, I got it out of sorts. That I think is a mix of a couple of things. So I don't know how much you can see on camera. However, turned in, the back kind of went, the whole thing just felt a little like a baby deer learning to walk. And I think what goes on there is that you've got tires that have kind of average grip, and then you've got the rear differential and the center diff that both want to lock on you. And you can watch it on the 4x4 response screen, where as you apply throttle out of a corner, the rear diff locks, and what that does is it makes this into a drift car. So you've got that, and then you have to catch it. And you've also got that combined with rear wheel steering that is also helping this thing pivot and act like a much smaller car. So it's not really problematic. It's just that your brain doesn't quite know what to do with itself as this giant SUV is handling like a much smaller car. Now, the good thing, like I was saying, is that the way the steering is, the way everything communicates back to you, it's actually easy enough to catch, and it's kind of fun if you remember the fact that it's going to do it. So I know if I slow down and get in a low gear and I just kind of goose it too hard out of a corner, it is predictable, and it will do the same thing every single time. And that is A, good, we love predictable, and B, actually really fun. Now, the suspension in this car uses the navigation data, just where it knows the roads you're on. You don't have to have a destination put in, but it uses the mapping data to know what road you're on, where it's going, and it preemptively sets the suspension based on where you're going to be turning. So if I'm going left, it's going to set the right side of the car a little bit firmer to help compensate for body roll. And it can do that with those fancy anti-roll bars, it can do it with the air springs, and it can do it with the adaptive dampers. So body roll here really feels pretty good, and this is just easy. Even though, like I said, it wants to get out of sorts if you're acting really, really dumb, this is easy to hustle fairly quickly. And the nice thing is then you put it back in comfort mode and it just doesn't care. It's back to being a very nice, plush, comfy SUV that is very comfortable on the highway. So this is really impressive. You know, this is not a road that's super difficult for a lot of things, but for a big, top-heavy SUV, this is something that you wouldn't necessarily drive quite as quickly as I am. And the V8 sounds just add to it. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't really think, like I said, it's going to be hard to get a V8 in one of these for a little while. Even the SVs next year are apparently all sold out already. And I don't think that's a problem because, like I said, I've driven that inline six as not as a plug-in hybrid, but as a mild hybrid. And in that case, it's really good. I don't think you're missing out on anything other than the noise if you choose to get one of these with the 6-cylinder. I think it is still going to be plenty quick. It's going to be plenty responsive. It's going to drive basically like this one no matter what. And it's a lovely thing on these back roads. Now, obviously, I can't believe I'm doing this in this. This is hysterical. Obviously, you're not gonna be driving like this every single day, so we should talk about how this is as just like a highway cruiser too. In general, I think it's really, really good. The seats are comfortable. These are 22-way adjustable front seats. They're heated, they're ventilated, they massage you. They are good for tall people. The driving position in general in this thing is great. It's just like every other Land Rover I've driven, all the way back to the older ones where they've got that kind of command seating position that they're so, well, they say they're so famous for. It's a good seating position. Yay, V8 noises. It's a good seating position, and it's combined with a low dash, low door sills, so you've got really good visibility out of here, and that is important both for on-road and off-road. And it's just a nice place to spend time. I love that they kept the real armrests here so you can adjust those, and then you've got this guy here. The materials in here are a little strange. This one has the optional non-leather, like the vegan leather sort of deal. And some of it is fine, some of it is less fine. The armrest in particular is already showing some stains. I don't know how well this is gonna age. And then they've got this interesting material that covers the speaker grills on the doors that is really cool. And again, we're not quite sure how it's gonna age. It's all interesting. They offer several color combos. And then I've got the highest end Meridian sound system, which I also think is pretty good. We've got another corner, we can't not. I got the suspension a little out of whack there, but you know, it's okay. Sorry, you can hear my camera gear sliding around in the back. This is the hardest, and one of these will probably ever be driven unless someone takes it on a racetrack because they're that dumb. But yeah, it does fine. You wouldn't do this in most SUVs. Okay, what was I saying? More normal people things about how this is on the highway. Pivi Pro infotainment system. This is pretty good. Nice high quality screen, nice resolution. It's very crisp, very easy to deal with. It's fairly quick and snappy for the most part. Some stuff can get a little slow. It's a curved screen that matches the curve of the dash, which is just kind of a nice touch. And then you've got your screen as your gauges here. They use the screen behind the steering wheel really well. You can pick how it looks and how it works. So I really love what they do. It's not just a waste of space and, you know, pixels for modern screen sake, or whatever you want to call it. So really like that. And then overall, easy enough to find everything. It keeps controls minimal, but everything that you need is a physical control, which is nice in an era of touchscreens. I think this is a pretty good setup overall, as someone who's kind of a curmudgeon and wants more buttons than anything else. So this is all fine and good. It's nice and quiet. They've got some active noise canceling going on. They've apparently got microphones in every wheel well to help figure out how to play the alternate frequencies that cancel out sound for you. And I can't tell that that's necessarily a thing, but it's certainly pretty quiet in here. You don't have a lot of tire noise. You don't have a lot of noise in general. You do get some wind noise on windier days, as with anything, but it's really not that bad. I feel like my entire drive of this has just been me giggling like a child because of the V8, and that's not the most helpful consumer advice, but let's be real, you're not on this channel for consumer advice. You're here because you like to drive silly cars. So, as far as the silly car is concerned, I think this is a very fun take on a Range Rover Sport. And I will admit, I didn't like the Range Rover Sport when it first came out for that L320 generation. I thought it was just kind of cribbing full-size Range Rover sales, and it was just people saying, oh, I have a Range Rover, but they don't have the big one, they don't have the real one. And it was fine. It was, I think, on a Discovery platform at the time. It's nice that this is on the real big full-size Range Rover platform, and it's really about as capable. It's just smaller, and to be honest, the big Range Rover is really big now. I drove one. I'll link to the video in the description, but I honestly think I have warmed to this more than I have warmed to the big L460 Range Rover, and that I think says a lot. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2023 Range Rover Sport First Edition. As always, thank you so much for coming along. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. We recently passed 10,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank each and every one of you enough for the support, for all the views, for all the everything. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you'd like to follow us elsewhere, we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. Give us a follow over there, or head over to outmotorsports.com if you'd like to join an ever-growing community of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors. We've got some events coming up both in person and online, and we would love to have you as our new best friend for each and every one of those events, and all the chat on Discord in between. Till next time, please stay safe, be well, see you again soon.